It was noontime today in the center of Beijing when a man walked to the middle of the Avenue of Eternal Peace.
Alright, welcome back to the Survival and Basic Badass Podcast, Kevin and Chuck. Today, well, we're going to talk about when the power goes out. When the power goes out for a little bit, for a day, for 2 days, or when the power goes out for long term. There's a lot of reasons that, the power might go out. There's a lot of things going on in the world. So obviously we have our normal weather and things like that, like tree branches dropping on the power lines. You get a good storm, things do go down and, whatever. So natural disasters, we'll say tornadoes, hurricanes, that kind of stuff. Sometimes you have people who don't know what they're doing at the power plant and things get a little haywire there too. Parts do wear out over time. You also have like civil unrest, where they actually destroy things, that kind of thing.
Yeah, you remember that was going on for a while? People were shooting at Transformers.
I think they still are, actually.
Are
They're
they?
just not reporting it anymore. They're like, oh, that's old news. We don't
Yeah.
care about that. Yeah, the Chinese guys with sniper rifles that we always imagine. We
Yeah.
always want to think all terrorists are Muslims and things, but I think there's some Chinese out there that might be out to get us. So I don't know about any of that. But EMPs, right? Solar flares, that kind of stuff. That's your longer. But we're not going to really so much how it happens, but how do we fix it, right? That's really what matters. We're all looking for a solution. But before we do, if this kind of stuff you like to hear, make sure like, subscribe, hit those buttons, that helps. I'm just saying, Kevin, we grow the channel, we make more things, you know how it is. All right, what do you got? I know you had something.
Well, I that's the big one that I worry about is the solar flares. That's the one that I think it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And
all right.
And our magnetosphere, the magnetic field around the Earth, it kind of protects us from that sort of stuff. It doesn't do a lot of damage right now, but they said that over the last 200 years, Earth's magnetic field has weakened by 9%.
Okay.
And European Space Agency Swarm satellite is saying that Earth's magnetic field is now losing 5% of its strength every year.
Every year.
Increasing, right.
No, it is exponential. So it's not like 5%, if you think about that. Right. Right. So, 5% this year and then 5% of that next year, you're not down 10%. Right. It's not like we have 20 years and we're done, or however math works. But that's still pretty scary. So, yeah, no, I'm concerned about that.
Right. And they say it might be related to pole shift and all sorts of, scary things. They said the pole shift of every 100,000 years or so. And that's about now.
Took out the dinosaurs, and you're like, well, Chuck, they didn't have electricity. Now I know you're saying, well, Chuck, no, they told me that it was a big asteroid that hit the planet. Maybe. Maybe. I was there, They said there's a big hole, but then they're like, but where's the rock? Right? If an asteroid hit us, where did it go? I would say, though, if something hit the planet that freaking hard that it went, created that giant crater, disrupted everything, I feel like that would be buried pretty freaking deep.
Right. I don't know anything about asteroids, but what are they? They're meteors. And until they hit the Earth, then they're meteorites. They're only asteroids when they're in space.
All right. But we're getting off topic. That was something I didn't prepare for. I don't know anything about meteorites and so on. So let's stay on task. So basically, power goes out. How do we prepare for our 3-day, right? Power goes out for even 3 hours. When you panic, what do you do? What can we do as the average homeowner to make life a little bit better when that happens?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's generators. Great thing to have. Gas generator. A lot of people have it set up so that if their power goes out, it automatically sets over. Some people just set it up in the backyard and plug all their extension cords in and run like that. Some people have it, wired into their uh their house, which is,
Right.
great.
And you can have it with your propane tank, where so you're normally just propane for heat and then your generator just kicks on and
Mm,
off. Now something like that, typically like $20,000.
right.
The cheaper version, you can get in there for about $8,000, I think.
Hmm.
But having a fixed generator is not an easy feat and not an easy price. Um,
Right.
the other alternative is say your 1,000 watt or 800-watt generator that you buy at Lowe's and you roll it home and you plug it in, keep your refrigerators on and your lights on. It's kind of a pain in the butt to drag it out of whatever storage you have it under and
Hmm.
pull it out, get it going and hooked up and whatever. Mine has a 20-gallon gas tank, like big bladder kind of thing that sits on top of it. It's like a big plastic
Hmm.
shell. I think it's 20 gallons. I don't know. It's a lot. And I'm afraid to leave 20 gallons in there because I never use it. And I'm like,
Right.
it's
And
going to
that
just go bad.
gas will go bad. Right.
And
Right.
so you got to
That's
drain it out once a year and then run it through the lawnmower or whatever it is you do, right? Yeah,
right.
that's the
Yeah, yeah. Now, one of the alternatives is diesel generators.
okay.
Diesel fuel lasts a little bit longer. It's a
A lot
little bit
longer.
more expensive,
Yep.
but they it'll definitely sit for a lot longer,
Yeah.
right? Um, the problem is that sometimes you run through 3 days of fuel, and
Yep.
then their power's still out. You can go back to the gas station, get
Well,
more gas for
what
I don't
else?
know, a
Let
week.
exactly. Let's talk about like flashlights, things like that. What are
Okay.
our alternative like light sources in the house? So obviously having flashlights staged at the doors or different places is pretty cool. Having them in the drawer, you can never find that stuff when it goes in
Yeah, I'm kind of a lunatic with flashlights. I've got them hidden all over the house and all the
right,
cars. Everybody's got flashlights somewhere. Um, but the thing is, you know, you pull those flashlights out of the drawer and you turn it on, it doesn't come on because the batteries are dead because somebody put it back in the drawer with the light still on and it just
right.
wore out. So having the batteries stocked up is a big deal, at least for
Yeah.
me. I have a big box just full of all kinds of different batteries.
Honestly, I found that the Amazon ones last pretty good. Um,
Hmm.
they're not like I used to be hell bent, like it has to be Energizer or whatever. And then, and then Sam's Club like switched to Duracell, and I was like, oh, they're okay. And then they ended up like they said 12-year shelf life, and after like 3 years, I open it up and they're all like green cake on the ends of them in the
Yeah,
pack.
all
Like
fucked up.
really?
Yeah.
And I started doing Amazon with like they do that auto ship or whatever. And I gotta say, like I use them with the trail cams and other stuff, and they work out pretty great.
Yeah, from everything I've read, the best cost to value is the
Yeah,
Amazon batteries that you
they-
get.
they're pretty easy, and I
Hmm.
just do the auto ship and keep a rotation going to those, and that's it. I usually always have at least probably 25 of each. Now, eventually, those are going to run out, right?
Hmm.
Power's out for 3 days, no problem. I'm golden.
Right,
Power's
right.
out for 3 months, those batteries might be depleted. So we have to think alternatives there. The, uh the other thing, like, oil lamps, stuff like that. People do burn down their houses quite a bit when the power goes out. So that's
Yeah,
something to be aware of.
and people
Candles,
do poison
yeah.
themselves with carbon monoxide by running stuff in the house when
Yeah. The
don't do that.
generator, you don't want it under the roof of the carport. Now, if it's a carport out away from the house and basically it just covers the generator and there's open on 3 or 4 sides or whatever,
Hmm.
you're probably okay. If you're not hanging out under there. But I gotta say, when the oxygen's gone, it does not take long to drop you. Uh, I've sat through quite a few OSHA classes, and it doesn't take long of no oxygen to put
Right,
you on the ground.
right. I know a lot of people during a power failure in Texas. This was a couple of years ago,
Yeah,
but a couple of people poisoned themselves by moving their grills inside
yeah.
and using the grill to heat their house.
I
And
did.
not a
I
good move.
I did work in a apartment complex one time, and they put a grill inside the bathtub, thinking that was going to be the like out of the way place. I'm like, because you were going to catch the stuff that dropped out of the grill. Like what? Like
Hmm.
why not just put it in the living room if you're already that dumb?
Right.
Just embrace it, or in the kitchen. That's where cooking happens.
Hmm.
I don't get it. So okay. Glow sticks, things like that are
Now,
sometimes an
touch
option.
on the
Yeah,
oil lamps real quick. They are pretty good because you can use almost any oil in the oil lamp. You can use your olive oil, your vegetable oil, any
yeah,
oil that you have in the house. It's not, any cooking oil will work. Any even you can even use fat as long as it's warm enough, that it's not solidified. Um, but like you said, that there are people that catch their house on fire using
yeah.
using
So
those.
just be aware of that. Another thing to touch on, because I do want to get into some long-term solutions here and have some good answers for you. But another quick thing, think about like propane heaters. Think about more permanent, like if you had a wood stove, because remember your furnace goes out, it ends bad, right?
Hmm.
Um, There are things about, you'll see things with the terracotta pots or clay pots and how you can, heat those with a candle. There's different neat little tricks, but bottom line, you know, get a sleeping bag and some sweaters, have some warm clothes.
Yeah.
That doesn't hurt also. All right, but what happens, Kevin, when things go worse a little bit more long term? Um,
Right.
3 days and the power doesn't come back on. Now my Amazon batteries are starting to be depleted a little bit. Um, it's getting a little hairy. What do I do?
You used up all your cooking oil and
My
your
cooking oil?
your gas is out, your generator's dying.
Yep.
Um, what do you do? Well, there's some other ways to make power, right? Um, I know that I've seen a couple of people that were set up some big windmills in their backyard,
Yeah.
just large ones, and they used them for pumping water out of a well into basically a trough, like a small pond for
Yes. Yes.
livestock. Well, you can transfer that over, and make that a generator and hook it up.
That is true.
It's going to be inconsistent unless you have a large battery to store that power and,
That's yeah,
you
you
know,
see those things in like Texas and a lot of, you got to think, am I always cursing how much wind I have on my property? If you're that guy, this is a good solution for you.
right.
If you're not like, "Oh, I never noticed the wind is a problem on my property," then this is probably not the answer for you.
Not a great
'Cause I always am
source.
like, "Oh, wind power," and I'm like, it doesn't really." Like, here, I get it, but I get it in, like, short bursts. Like, we get, tornadoes in the area. We don't I've never really seen anything where I live. I'm surrounded by a lot of woods and hills. Like, I'm up in the hills, whereas there's some lowlands near me that get really bad. I know it
Mhm.
took out a Pfizer plant not that long ago by me that like shut down jobs and everything permanently. Like they were like,
Yeah.
"Oh, we're just not even going to go
We're
back
done.
there. We're just closing the door on that property." So yeah, I mean, but again, I feel I don't have enough consistent wind that I could count on something like that. So just kind of know your place, right? If you're on top of a mountain, this might be the answer for you.
Right.
But just be aware that wind isn't for everybody. But yeah, you hook it up to like a car alternator, or they sell different things for alternators to
Mhm.
create, to harness that wind power. It's pretty awesome. And they sell some pretty cool kits, but you are looking at a little money. Um, Another source of power generation like that is they have like water wheels, right? That kind of thing. Same thing where you get that rotation. You have a consistent stream by you. Water wheel's pretty cool.
Yeah, a friend of mine,
Yeah.
he owns an electrician's business,
Mhm.
and, he was telling me that they were having an old, remember the Mohonk Mountain House?
Yep.
It's
Yep.
an old hotel, it was founded probably 200 years ago, long long time ago,
Yeah.
and he said they were having a sale getting rid of, a bunch of junk that they had everywhere, and he went up there and they had, water wheel
Nice.
generator,
And the
and he had a
generator.
screen.
Wow.
And so he bought it. He brought it home. He set it all up, and he said it's great, but it really only saves him like $8 in electric every year. It's
That's
not
it. You don't
producing that
realize how
much.
little, right. It takes a lot of turning. Now, the idea with a water wheel is I feel like he's missing something in the step because I don't see a big place not, you know, not
Hmm.
doing something that put out some volume, you
Yeah, I
know?
think it was the flow that he had on his
Okay.
property.
Right, his
The
stream
water
wasn't
use.
really
Yeah, it
and
wasn't
that's the
wasn't
thing,
really
like,
moving it.
when you see a water wheel, like, you watch Little House on the Prairie and they're running that sawmill off that big wheel they got. The idea is you're going from a giant wheel
Hmm.
that's turning to a tiny shaft that, like, you're turning the shaft of an alternator, right?
Right.
So you're going from huge to little. So it's basically geared where you're getting maximum revolutions and it's really moving like a car thing. Another thing to think about is don't ever take your car to the junkyard without pulling the alternator out because you
Hmm.
never know there's something good you could do with that. And if you
Right.
really want to get crazy into power generation like that, never take your new washing machine to the dump without pulling out the back because you'll find that it's got copper windings in the back that like if it's a front load that there's a wheel on the back that's just filled with magnets and copper. It's like a rotor stator setup.
Hmm.
Anyway, you can do cool things with that. I'm just saying, if you want to go to crazy town, getting rid of your washer, you want to steal some parts out of it. That's all I'm saying.
Hmm. And
Um,
we're all about crazy town here.
Now, everyone who thinks preppers off grid, the first thing that always comes to mind with me is solar, 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 right?
Yes.
That's going to be your magic trick.
Hmm.
Um Again, the downside to solar and honestly it's the same with wind and water wheels and everything is battery storage.
Right.
Batteries are expensive and storing that electricity is tough. Um, the Tesla Powerwall. It's weird though. I know people. You guys know I like that EMP shield. If you try and protect it, it voids the warranty on your Powerwall. Like
Hmm.
people have reached out to Tesla on that. Hey, we're gonna hook this up. Is this okay? Whatever. And they're like, look, if you do it, it's voided and whatever, even though it's a protection thing. I would still do it anyway, but I'm just saying, you do you, right?
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, a good lithium battery. I know when I went to like AutoZone, I was like, oh, my trailer, I have a winch on there, and I want a battery that's going to last forever. Um, what do you want to sell me that's going to be something that I can charge it up, whenever I connect my trailer,
Hmm.
when the battery is plugged in or whatever, but it's not going to be dead. But I don't need to do a trickle charger all winter or whatever with it, and not be a pain in my butt. Now, a trickle charger probably help anyway. I ended up buying like a little 8-watt little solar thing that I can plug into the battery and set on the trailer. But the bottom line is deep cycle, like marine batteries. You think of your boat. I know my boat, I used to park that thing for 6 months, go back out, and you think you're out on the water and you got your CBs and everything hooked up to it, and they work when they need to work, and then you shut the boat off and you don't touch it for 3 weeks, and that battery's fine. Those deep cycle are the way to go. Just saying, putting that out there. I
Yeah.
know they
Yeah.
also have the dry cell ones that you can look into, but anyway.
Yeah. I recently got a uh uh charger or a battery pack for camping.
Mhm.
And I set it up. I charged it up before I left, and it was great. Kept my phone charged. Kept I was able to play music on speakers and all
Yep.
sorts of great stuff. And lasted about 3 days. With light use,
Yeah.
and then it had and it charged up on the wall in about an hour and a half.
Okay.
And
Yeah, that's the big difference right here.
yeah, and then I set up the solar panel for it. After it ran out. And after about 8 hours of direct sunlight, it was about 20% charged.
Yeah.
So it's not the same as plugging it into the wall.
It it does depend. I know when I went to prepper camp, which I believe I'm going to be back there again this year. So you guys might want to check out getting some tickets. It's in last time you got a little excitement, got to see Hurricane Helene up front. So,
Hmm.
there's, you're looking for an adventure. Prepper Camp delivers. I'm just saying. You might want to check it out, get tickets. I believe I'm going to be a speaker again this year. I know I'm going to be there and have a booth. The speaker thing, I haven't really got confirmation. But if you go on the page that says meet the speakers, I'm there. So, I mean, at least I got my picture up there. Who knows?
Hmm.
Could be because they don't update their website. I don't really know.
That could be.
But,
Yeah.
who knows? So, anyway, the I had one of those like fold out like 28-watt or 40-watt, 3 panel things that has its own like little USB jacks. And I got to say, I threw that over a chair while I was in the booth doing stuff and it charged up cell phone. Like, dude, I'd say it charged my cell phone from like 10% to like 90% in like 2 hours.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, now we got something." And I
Hmm.
was I was pretty impressed. So, you might wanna check those out. I'll mention it, you can I'll put it in the notes or something. But so that's an option. I I know one of the big things is water, right? I worry about how am I gonna get electricity, how am I gonna get water out of the well? And so I ended up buying a, solar well pump. They're not super fast, like gallons per minute usually, unless you obviously can up the power to anything and make
Right.
it whatever you want it to be. But a lot of the typical ones, like the one I bought's like 128 bucks, but it does reasonable for 128 bucks, where I threw a battery, the the well, the well pump, and I got 300-watt solar panels, and I threw those actually on the roof of the well house.
Hmm.
And, I'll eventually do a video of the setup there. And what's cool is I did another pressure tank with this because it's weird. I have 2 wells, and I did a pressure tank on one, a pressure tank on the other, because the idea is I can shut off in between the two so they're not connected. And one is just my house, and then one I use for like farm stuff, right? For the other water. And so just having that option, I did 2 pressure tanks, but I end up leaving them connected because most of the time I just use the primary well, because,
Hmm.
like I said, the power is a little bit questionable, but having the double pressure tanks really helps it store some. Obviously you could just buy a bigger pressure tank instead of 2, that would be
Hmm.
logical, right? But this way I can isolate the system and have 2 things going at the same time, that's
Right.
the logic there, um, and not worry about, different things. Anyway, solar well pump, but you're going to need, again, batteries for storage, and you're going to need a couple of 100 watts there. Now, really, if you want to keep life going, the biggest thing you want to do is cut down your electricity usage, right?
Right.
I know that kind of is contrary to the title, right? I'm going to find a miracle solution. Well, a miracle solution to not paying the electric man to bring a wire to your house and keep you connected is expensive. You're
Hmm.
looking at least $20,000, right? And so you need to think of how do I cut, and to be honest, even with that, I know when I was in New York, and this was 7, 8 years ago, technology keeps getting better and better. But I had the guys come out to my house and they were like, yeah, if you cut down your electricity usage in half, and give us $20,000.
Right.
Obviously, there were rebates and plans and paid out over 20 years and cheaper than your electric bill and, all this nonsense. But
Right.
basically, you give us 20 grand, cut down how much power you use, then we'll solve your problem. And I'm like,
Right.
yeah, that's not that great,
Yeah. Yeah. No more electric stove. No more dryer.
Right.
Turn
Exactly.
off all your power. Yeah.
So you need to think of alternatives to those things, right? To exactly your electric stove, your dryer, those are your biggest things, your water heater.
Hmm.
And to be honest, number 3 after those are the big ones. But then when you cut it down, then your well pump, is the next, but it's a
Your
way
big
lower
screen
level.
TV. Yeah.
Well, the big screen, as long as they're LED, they're getting better.
Yeah.
But yeah, I hear you. You do want to think, right, how you can crush that down. And that's something you should start implementing like right now. One, Kevin talks about $800 a month electric bills. If I had an $800 electric bill, one, I guarantee every light in my house is LED.
Hmm.
Two, which pretty much they all are anyway, right?
Yep.
Next, I would go in and make sure that, I'm shutting off every light. Like I'm like the light Nazi as I go around. What? But
Yeah,
also
that's my wife.
putting things on like a power strip and, because how many things, what is it they say, like phantom power or whatever,
Right.
are
Right.
just drawing all the time. And if you have things on a power strip and just sucking down, and the other secret of the pros is charge all your stuff while you're at work or in your car, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
bring it with you. And, you
Yeah.
don't need it.
I
Yeah.
actually turn off breakers in my breaker
Mhm.
panel. You know,
Yep. Shut
whole
it down.
sections of the house are offline.
I'd say I don't understand how we could have switched to everything to Energy Star, efficient, and cut down breakers, and then our electric bill triples. I'm like, wait,
Hmm.
that doesn't add up. And they're
Yeah.
like, well, more people are using it. Well, yeah, but we also have better technology making it and getting it, and
Right.
whatever. It just doesn't make sense, except that maybe they're trying to stick it to you. I'm just
Yeah. Well,
saying.
I mean, everybody wants money, and they're really good at getting it. That's the big difference.
Yeah. So solar again, I think ideally if I was trying to run an off-grid homestead and I didn't have stuff, I would look at like 2000 watts, something like that. But again, I'm planning on reshaping my whole life. I'm not running my house on 2000 watts. Like I said, you're not running a dryer, you're not running an electric stove. You're switching to propane, you're cooking with fire outside.
Hmm.
You may get cancer or something. I'm not sure how that works. They always
Yeah.
say that the people who cook outdoors, it's like highly carcinogenic, all that smoke and everything.
Yeah, that's sounds like
But
it's the bitches that are saying that.
yeah,
It's
right?
not real men that
Exactly.
worry about that stuff.
Exactly. So that's
Yeah,
definitely
everything gives you cancer now. It's not, you know,
that, that's
you can't really whittle it down, you know?
that's definitely a
Maybe
thing.
stop smoking cigarettes and stop drinking alcohol, but I mean, what's the
Do
point of
you
living
have any
longer?
thoughts on cutting down power? Like I know one of the big ones in my mind is always like a rain catchment system, like putting up the gutters in the bar. Because
Yep.
again, then you're not running that well, like
Mhm.
nearly as much. So at least if you're using it for the garden, for the other things, very easy to, have it go into 55-gallon drums. Um, I've seen people, like I said, you could kind of move a drum to higher locations or keep it up high when it comes down so it gravity feeds,
Right.
things like that. You could set stuff up, but this is all long-term planning. But it
Mhm.
turns out that's what we do as preppers, right?
Right.
You start to implement these things. So, slowly. You don't do it overnight. I mean, it's great if you got the budget to do things,
And
in
the
the
time.
miracle way,
Yeah.
but these are things, steps that you could get there. And I got to say, solving your water problem without electricity sounds really cool,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
Um, any other thoughts on how to kind of like cut down on power usage before we
Yeah,
move
well, I mean, you were talking about that, about switching all your lights with LED lights.
on?
That's smart. They're a little bit more expensive, but I mean, it's hard to find non-LED light
Anymore, right?
bulbs
Right.
anymore. Yeah.
The
Um,
big thing I see though is they're going to tell you that they're going to last 5 times longer. That's crock shit. They
yeah,
don't last
that's
any longer
bullshit.
than a normal bulb. I would say they're even less efficient as far as lasting longer,
Yeah.
but we won't. That's a different story.
Uh, the other thing is, wood stove.
Mhm.
They're great for warming your house, but you can cook on them. It's
Yep.
not a hard skill to learn. You know, baking, frying, any of that stuff is easy to do. Pot belly stove, any kind of stove
Yep.
where you know,
You have a flat top.
not a fireplace, but a
Right.
wood stove. Yeah.
Right. And the other thing, maybe an outdoor kitchen, right?
Hmm.
Setting that up. Uh,
Yep.
that's not a bad thing to do. And how cool is it, really? I mean, if you went up to somebody's house and they had this big, like, brick built, outdoor kitchen, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Yeah. The
And
other
you get to
thing
play
is
with cement.
hanging your clothes up to dry rather than running that dryer. It's not hard to set up a clothesline.
But Kevin, they're
Really
all
cheap.
stiff and,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know, just don't have sensitive skin, you know?
don't be a delicate flower.
Don't be delicate.
All right.
Yeah. The other thing is a lot of people say, "Well, I don't have the weather for that." Well,
Oh,
the only reason you don't have the weather for it is if it's raining. You can hang them up in freezing weather and they'll still dry, you know?
yes.
It's it'll work just fine. Might take a little bit longer, but,
And
whatever.
besides, you're making a fire to heat things, and then you're like, "Well, Kevin, my clothes will smell all smoky." Yeah, they will, but you be all
Yep.
right. Toughen
Mhm.
up, right? Hey,
Amen.
be a man. You know, you won't need to buy that fancy perfume that you're wearing. That's right, I said perfume because if you're that guy, then maybe that's what you need. But instead, you can smell like man and smoke.
Mhm. I
You know,
another great thing for fuel efficiency is or electricity efficiency is fill your refrigerator up with beer.
ooh,
Um, so when the power does go out, that beer is going to
hold the
keep
cold.
the inside cold. It's like adding ice to it. You know what I
And
mean?
what
It's
I do,
already cold
Kevin,
and it's going to store
right?
that temperature.
What I do is I actually line the walls of the refrigerator all the way around and stack it up on the sides. So it's a whole other layer of insulation with
Right.
beer.
Uh
Right.
huh.
They're just
That's
beers everywhere. And you have beer. So I mean there's that
right. Right. And how bad is the apocalypse
if you have beer.
really going to be if if you've got two
Cold beer
24
even better,
packs?
right?
Right. Exactly. Exactly. I mean, these are real solutions that we're offering here,
Real
and this is
solutions for
solid
real
ideas.
problems. All right, Kevin, I like it. Um Another thing is more and more I'm trying to, and I haven't pulled this off completely, but I have a little bit. Is adding solar lights to the exterior of your property. I know I bought like Amazon pretty cheap. You have like a deck outside with 4x4 posts. I got a bunch of those little caps that are
Yep.
like little solar lights. And I got to say, they're pretty awesome and they're pretty cheap. I mean, like 20 bucks got me two of them. And I know that's like a little bit of money, but really $100, you could kind of light up your back deck area where things go bad. I know when I go to Sam's or Tractor Supply all the time, they have some kind of like made in China barn light for like 25 bucks that you can solar top and put on the side of the barn or your shed or your
Yep.
outbuildings where you can kind of light things up. That's kind of cool. I know
Yeah. If
way back. Yeah,
my coop is all set up with solar lights, and that's great. I mean, now they won't go into the coop unless the solar light is on. So it's kind of like I've trained him like that, but accidentally, you know.
yeah,
So I have it, where I turn it off and on. It's always ready to go because it's always,
right.
always sitting in the sun. But I mean, I have the same thing. Back deck is all lit at night. Backyard is set. I'm not going to trip over anything in my yard. But
It's
those solar lights are pretty good in the sense that you could actually have the bulb set inside on a wire and the solar panel outside,
right.
and you know anytime that the it gets dark enough, those lights kick on and you're good.
Yep, exactly. No, that's awesome. And then the thing is, like the beauty is if you get the system kind of dialed in right, you can have it where it charges up in the day and then it turns on when it gets dark, but it kind of gets dimmer and darker as things. I guess they don't get dimmer anymore. LEDs are kind of on and off,
Hmm.
but it basically shuts off after a couple hours as the battery wears out. And that's
Hmm.
okay because it's late at night and they should be sleeping and
Right.
so that's not a bad way to be. Now there are other things you can look into. We should probably do an episode, but gasifiers. Kevin, you did a little research on that, or
Yeah, wow, that's a huge pain in the neck, these things. I was really looking into it, did a lot of research, and I still don't really understand how to make one of my
Now,
at
we had a
home.
listener do one, and he sent me a message about it. You know what? I'm gonna have to talk to him about. You know what? Message me at preppingbadass@gmail.com, and maybe we get you on an episode, and you can tell me about how it works. I know
Yeah.
there's a FEMA manual that actually tells you how to build one. It's weird how all the crazy conspiracies, nut job prepper stuff, FEMA tells you exactly how to do all that stuff, like
Yeah.
building a shelter,
Hmm.
like a bomb shelter, like, hardcore, and
Right.
how to, build a gas fire, how to, do long-term food storage. FEMA tells you all this stuff. And then they're like, yeah, anybody who does that, we need to put them on a watch list. Those are the crazies.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so wood gas is a fuel that can be made with, it's pretty simple equipment, inexpensive. Um, the moisture in your wood has to be like really low.
Okay.
So, if you get, wood outside, your campfire wood, it's not gonna ever be dry enough.
Really?
You know,
Okay.
the kiln dried wood is 6 to 20% dry. That's your 2x4s from the lumber store. Um, you need to be less than 20%
Wow.
wood moisture. So so basically it's converting flammable gas through high temperature and controlled oxygen limited environment. You're basically making fuel with the smoke from your fire.
Gotcha.
But also you can blow it up. You know what I mean? It's also a bomb. So if you're not careful, you can blow your fingers off if you're fucking around with it.
All right. So that turns out gas can be flammable, is what you're saying.
Right, right,
All right.
especially when it's pressurized.
All right. Just something to think about. I would say I watched that. There's a show like Homestead Rescue on Discovery. I watch all the time, and the
Mhm.
guy was making a sawmill, and they ended up making basically a greenhouse for a kiln, and they were drying all the wood, with that. They just basically made a shed, painted all the walls black inside, and then made the front facing wall
Glass.
glass. And,
Mhm.
I think maybe they had a way to vent it, a fan to get the humid air out kind of thing. And that was it. But we're saying there are options that don't have to be super expensive, right? Because some people, their brain like shuts down. Oh, well, I could never get wood like that. So what am I going to do? I'm not going to go to the hardware store and buy wood to do it. But there are other ways, right? You can get around it and solve
Mhm.
problems.
Right.
That's kinda the whole off-grid, prepper
Yeah, I
kinda
mean,
thing.
people lived off grid for thousands of years before,
We
before
just
Edison,
forgot how to
before
do it,
Franklin, before yeah.
They always say that's the big thing in the prepper community now is that they're like, "Oh, it'd be like going back to the 1900s or whatever," and everyone's like, "Well, no, not really, because people knew how to do shit in the 1900s.
Right,
They don't know
exactly.
how to do stuff anymore." Well, that's why we do this podcast, right? Let's get back to. Not that we have to go back to old ways and whatever. It's just let's not forget things we've already come up with, right?
Right.
And it turns out as things get crappier and crappier and cheaper, some of these old ways are actually turning out to have been a little bit better.
Mhm.
As quality goes down, um, that's something to think about. One of the other things, right, when the power goes out is EMP, right? That's one of the things to take it out. Now, the problem is, even if you have the solar backup, you have the generator, you have everything, then what happens if all your stuff doesn't work? That doesn't really help anything, right?
Right.
So, EMP Shield, they do whole house protection where it's basically like a surge protector on your house. Now, thing is, if you have a solar setup, anything that's plugged in at the time inside your house is going to be protected. So that's pretty awesome. And obviously, if you're away, you're out in your vehicle and your vehicle dies and you can't even get home to your preps, that would suck. So you want to make sure that you have the option there and you can get back and get to the things that you need, right?
Now how does
So
the one for your car work?
Again,
EMP
it's like
shield?
a surge protector, but no
Uh-huh.
joke, anything plugged in your car, your radio, your iPhone is plugged in a charger, and
Mhm.
connected to the car, all
Right.
those things are going to be protected because it's like a surge protector. So when it basically, the big thing is you're like, oh well, I'll just buy a surge protector and I'm good, right? The things I care about, I'll plug them into a surge protector. Well, your typical one you buy at the store is it's like, we'll say in a hundredth of a second, it catches it, and
Hmm.
then EMP shield is like 10 times faster than your average one. I
Right.
don't know what the how many times in a second,
Right.
right, that each one is because I don't have it right in front of me. But the bottom line is it's fast enough that it's gonna catch with an EMP, and that's really all that matters, right, is to catch that surge, and it takes you that little bit further, keeps your car running, but it also protects all the things in your house, all your things that, your TV, your whatever, your radio, your backup things that are going to matter and part of that protection. So, you guys maybe heard me mention it, but I got you a code badass. If you go to empshield.com and you use the code badass, it's actually going to save you $50. So it's a good time to jump on it and go check it out. But that's what I got. So make sure you guys like and subscribe. Any more quick tips, Kevin, or we're
That's all
there?
I got for today.
All right. So obviously, if you have better ideas and we miss something, you're going to put it in the comments, right? Because that's what we like to see and hear. Um, emails, thoughts, yeah, thoughts, concerns, show ideas. Email us at preppingbadass@gmail.com. Um, I'll put a link to the website and the Facebook group. Check those out. We do have a new Facebook group that not that new. It's about 2 months, 3 months old now. Make sure that you sign up there. And yeah, I would say with that, stay safe and we will talk to you guys next week.